Welcome to and welcome back to Wrong Sports, and this next episode is going to be about the Holy Cross football team, but actually just 1 or 2 years in particular. But the Holy Cross football team is one of the more interesting schools as they have been around for over a century. They have a long rivalry with Boston College, though not really anymore, and they have some interesting coaches like Eddie Anderson and a coach that I have covered in depth in Rick E. Carter, and you can check out that story in the link above, also in the description below. But there is another story of a Holy Cross football season that was unlike any other college football season that any team has gone through. Holy Cross in 1969 were coming into the season off of a 3-win team in 1968, which was a decline from 1967. Also, they were bringing in an entirely new coaching staff this year, too. The new coach was a longtime Lehigh and Princeton assistant in Bill Witten, who knew of Holy Cross and their athletes since Lehigh and Princeton yearly scheduled Holy Cross. The team in 1969 were 75 players strong and also had 22 seniors looking to complete their career with a good season. But a hot summer and a contaminated fire hydrant would change their season and some of their lives forever. But before I get into this, make sure, as always, you are subscribed to the channel below. Ring that bell so you can get updates on brand new videos that I will be dropping in the future. And please make sure that you check out my Patreon, patreon.com/wrongsports. I do have exclusive videos there in the description below. Getting back to Holy Cross, they were having their summer preseason practice in early to mid-August. Holy Cross would practice at their campus field, Fitton Field, in Worcester, Mass. The surroundings of this campus look much different than they did, but you can see the area and its surroundings. You can see Mill Brook, and behind Mill Brook, you can see a bunch of residential area, as well as some commercial space and some industrial space as well. But I mention that because summer practices, like pretty much all summer practices everywhere, were going to be hot and brutal. So to keep players and also coaches cool during these hot and humid days, they would drink water from a fountain or from buckets of water that got water from that same fountain. I mention this because they didn't drink the water throughout the entire summer days of the practice. I believe they only drank it on a couple of days. Now, I know I haven't mentioned a lot about football, but it's hard to because they really don't play a lot of football because of the factors that I'm mentioning now. And they would start to see some things happening on September 24th, just 3 days before Holy Cross's opening at Harvard. A sophomore player, Bob Cooney, was the first to fall ill with flu-like symptoms. The sickness of that player wasn't really news until their first game 3 days later versus Harvard in Cambridge. According to newspaper accounts, Holy Cross was slow and lethargic and looked worse as the game went on, which resulted in a 13-0 loss to Harvard. And the final is actually pretty spectacular when you understand that by this point, illness was ravaging pretty much this entire team and the coaching staff. There would be more sicknesses, but really a big major sign that something was going really wrong was 2 days after the Harvard game, on September 29th, when another player was diagnosed with infectious hepatitis and admitted to St. Vincent Hospital. As the week went on, more players were starting to feel ill and look slow, but they were scheduled for an October 4th game at Dartmouth. In the hours leading up to the game and on the bus ride to the Dartmouth game, players were getting sick and some didn't even dress for the game because they just felt like they couldn't even dress. That's how bad they were feeling. By the time the undermanned Holy Cross Crusaders football team took the field against the Big Green of Dartmouth, the situation had become dire. Players on the team, like co-captain Bill Monsevitz, said that people actually started to vomit on the field, and players were collapsing on the field and on the sidelines. As the game continued, more players needed to be replaced, and accounts from the players said that there were visual signs in all of the ill players by now, and that was about 2 to 3 dozen by this point. But even with all of these players getting ill, vomiting, players not even dressing, Holy Cross managed to make it through through this game. Not sure if Dartmouth just, need it just to make the game go faster, because even Dartmouth players saw how bad and ill the Holy Cross players were, that some of the Dartmouth players were starting to do light tackling and just making them get down, not trying to hurt them, because they just saw how something was going wrong here. Holy Cross did manage to score, though, in this game on a touchdown pass from QB Howie Brook to Dan Harper. And I have to mention that because not only were these the only points in the game for Holy Cross, which resulted in a 38-6 loss, but it would be their only points of the season, as there were now many players ill. And with only about 30 players not so seriously ill and a slight chance to play, more tests were done just to see what illness all of these players and coaches had. It was pretty obvious, though, by this point, not only by the players and the staff, but also by the parents, that these players had jaundice or hepatitis. That was because some of the players were getting a yellowish color, and they just looked lethargic not only through the game, but just through the days. Just 2 days after that Dartmouth game, full testing was done on all players and coaches, and the test results would quickly show what many had assumed, and that was that the team had been affected by hepatitis. Head coach Bill Witten and their athletic director Vince Daugherty called a team meeting of all the players that could actually attend and announced that Holy Cross's remaining 8 games, that being the rest of the season, were canceled. That was because in total, 90 of the team's 97 players and coaches were affected by hepatitis, though there were some more seriously ill than others. The most seriously ill players were sent to the infirmary, while the rest were quarantined for weeks at Hanselman Hall, which is a great name for a hall, and the players were actually forced to not leave for several weeks. They were fed like prisoners, basically, where people would put the food outside of their doors. They would take the food inside, leave the trays outside. Only doctors and other medical personnel were allowed near the building. No parents were allowed either for several weeks, but 24 or so were seriously ill for about a month. So now with some of the players and coaches having to be quarantined and the season being over, the school and also the city of Worcester investigated how this could have happened and if it was going to affect more people. They would bring in Dr. Leonard Morse, who was the director of infectious disease division at St. Vincent Hospital, and led an investigation that determined the cause of the hepatitis outbreak. It would start on August 29th, where a fire broke out on Cambridge Street, which is only 2 blocks from Fenton Field. That fire was only a few days after Holy Cross started their summer practice. Due to the fire, the water pressure fell, and due to the demand of not only the school, but also the small surrounding community, it caused negative pressure, and now most of the water in the water lines was groundwater. The problem with that, though, was the groundwater was contaminated by what Dr. Morse found were 4 children that were also infected with hepatitis playing in the area and had used the water line in the area and then also left the water running, which caused even more water pressure problems. It was just problem on top of problem. Due to the water pressure problems, the water that the football team was drinking was mostly groundwater, which was contaminated by this point, remember, and there was nothing that the football team could do, as once they drank the water, they were infected. And remember, I mentioned that some players would state that in the early days of summer practice, the days were hot and humid, so you were forced to drink the water, or at least throw it on you or put it in your mouth and spit it out to stay cool, and that added to the problem. So even if you drank some of the water and spit it out, you might still get infected with hepatitis. But the number of days that the summer practice went on for and the number of days that they used this water from this contaminated water line was not going to help them avoid getting the infectious disease, unfortunately. Like I mentioned, though, luckily there were no deaths associated with this, but it did cancel the entire 1969 season, and for some ended their football career, as there were seniors and redshirts didn't exist to help them get another season, so they'd be done. However, 2 players and the Holy Cross colors would take the field one more time in 1969, but about 3,000 miles away. That was because Sacramento State College donned the Holy Cross Crusaders uniform for their final home game on November 20th. Students at the college even paid to fly in Holy Cross's two team captains, Tom Lamb and Bill Monsevens, to be guests at the game, which was a cool story for them. Luckily, they would be coming back for the next season, and most of their team would be coming back for that season as well. About 50 of them that were affected in the 1969 season would be back for 1970, but due to the school losing a lot of money since they didn't play in 1969, the athletic department had to make some of that money back, so they would schedule a 6th away game and 11th game total, which was the first time that Holy Cross had done this, since it was allowed only a few years before this. The 1970 season, like I mentioned, had a lot of players that were sick and coming back from the previous season, as well as some new players, but I couldn't confirm the exact number. But like I mentioned, there was about 22 seniors in 1969, so about 50 were coming back from the previous year into this year. Their coach, Bill Witten, was going to be coming back as well, but even with all these players and coaches coming back, the infected team that went 0-2 the previous year, they went 0-10-1, as they did manage to get a 20-20 tie at home versus UConn to not have a winless season. Bill Witten, though, would leave the university after the season, giving him a total coaching record of 0-12-1, making him one of the few coaches in college football history to have a winless college coaching career record. The team, though, would improve the next season under Ed Doherty and even had a winning record in 1972, and then they would hit their stride in the 1980s under Rick E. Carter, who, like I mentioned at the beginning, I did an entire video about. You can check that out in the link below. Holy Cross would also get a lot better under Mark Duffner, and they were very good recently, making the FCS playoffs a couple of times. So like I mentioned, this team is still very good. It's still a very interesting college football team, and this is one of the more interesting college football stories that doesn't get covered enough. So thank you so much for hanging out with me throughout this entire journey of the 1969 Holy Cross football season that got completely canceled. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Once again, if you aren't already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel below. Please check out my Patreon, patreon.com/wrongsports. And you can also check out my wrestling channel. I have a link in the description below.